I'm Lauren with Pack Hacker, and in this video we're taking a detailed look at the Bellroy Lite travel pack and the Cotopaxi Allpa. Let's dive in. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Allpa 28 liter in comparison to the Lite travel pack from Bellroy in the 30 liter, but they do come in a couple different sizes. So with the Allpa, at the time of this video, they come in 42 and 35 liter sizes, and then the Bellroy also comes in a 38 liter. So depending on which size you get, you kind of get a little bit more storage from each of them. The 28 Allpa is definitely going to be the small, I mean, quite literally because of the liter size, but the 28 liter Allpa is and feels like just slightly smaller than this Bellroy 30 liter. And then the Allpa 35 liter feels, you know, just a little bit bigger than this Bellroy 30 liter. And then it just kind of goes up from there. But I would say liter size wise, what they market feels pretty similar to what you're getting out of each of them. So, but we're gonna take a look at how these two compare as like the smaller sizes. With the materials, I would say that's like one of the larger differences between them, not just from like an aesthetic standpoint, but also just function. So with the Allpa here, we have a mix of like an 840D TPU coated nylon on the front, and then a recycled 840D on the like a ballistic ripstop nylon on the side, and then ripstop polyester on the inside. And then with Bellroy, we have recycled nylon, recycled polyester, but it's like primarily nylon. And then the Allpa, this size is 2.5 pounds, where the Bellroy is 2.09 pounds. So the Bellroy is going to be just slightly lighter, and it definitely feels that way. So if like weight is one of your primary things, then you know that's definitely something to keep in consideration. But they're on the outside both pretty basic. I would say obviously the Allpa is going to be a little bit more loud with their colorways. That's sort of their thing. Bellroy's more subtle, but we do have attachment points on Bellroy in addition to, like we've got up here if you want to attach gear, and then the Allpa has attachment points on either corner as well. But otherwise, you know, pretty subtle look from both of these. The biggest difference is that the Allpa has a water bottle pocket that's super stretchy. Like you can fit, you know, good sized bottles in here. And with like no problem, whereas the Bellroy does not have an external water bottle pocket. So that's a deal breaker. That's something to keep in mind. In terms of what you get out of the harness system, I would say these are also pretty comparable. So starting looking at the Allpa, you can see that we've got a sternum strap on a rail system, which gives you really easy micro adjustments, versus Bellroy, where it's not quick and easy to move it around. And this is really the only support that you get on the Bellroy as well. So you've got this little like hook, you hook it into whatever loop is the fit for you, and just kind of tighten and loosen as needed. You can see like it seems like it comes out really easily, but I found that when I had this on, like it didn't move or anything like that. So that's good. But the Cotopaxi, the Allpa, is similar to, you know, a design that we see on a lot of other packs. We also have a hip belt on the Allpa, which we don't have any option for a hip belt or anything like that on Bellroy's. So that's something where this hip belt isn't really that beefy. It lifts a little bit of weight off, but I would say even when I had the same amount of stuff packed in both of these bags, I didn't really feel like I was missing a hip belt on the Bellroy. It's something where like if they had it, I would have used it because it's nice to just take a little bit of extra weight off. But because this bag is lightweight, and even when it's really full, it doesn't feel super heavy or like bulky. I just felt like the straps themselves were, you know, pretty decent. I think what I missed on both of these was load lifters, and you'll see when I put these on that they both kind of pull back. I would say the Cotopaxi, the Allpa, pulls back a little bit more, and it would be nice to kind of cinch that forward a little bit to really lock in the fit. But they're pretty comparable in terms of carry comfort. The only difference, well, apart from the hip belt and things like that, but the main difference that I noticed is that like when you initially put it on, the Bellroy straps are really soft and flexible, and they're pretty thin, whereas the straps on the Allpa are a little bit thicker and they're stiffer on the sides as well. So I have a smaller frame, and generally speaking, softer straps or thinner straps feel more comfortable on me. And I found that to be beneficial on the Bellroy. Like, it was just more comfortable when I initially put it on versus the Allpa that feels a little bit bulkier and feels a little bit like chunkier when it's actually on my body. But in terms of carry comfort for both of these, I don't think you can really go wrong. And then the Bellroy's actually there, the straps come off and you can tuck them away in this back panel, which is nice as well. This is the Allpa 28 liter when it's on my back. You can see what I was talking about earlier with it just pulling back a little bit, and that's still with the hip belt attached. So even with the hip belt and the sternum strap really securely in place, I feel like that all the hip belt really does is just like secure it down here a little bit more. It lifts a little weight off, but it's not like a significant amount. It still feels like I'm kind of being pulled back a little bit with the Allpa, and the Bellroy, like I mentioned, is pretty similar, which we'll look at in a second. But it looks it can start to look a little bit saggy on if you don't have it completely full. So that's one thing that I noticed for sure with the Allpa. I think maybe just because the materials are a little bit like thicker and chunkier, it's a little bit more visible when it's not completely full, but it does look pretty beefy on my body. Obviously, as you go up in size, the Allpa, the larger versions of them have like beefier hip belts, stowaway straps, that type of a thing. You get a couple extra features. The 28 liter is definitely the most bare bones of them all, but still comfortable considering its size. This is the Bellroy bag when it's on my actual body. You can see, similar to the Allpa, it has that same like gap and same kind of look of pulling me back. And that's where, like I mentioned, load lifters I think would come in handy just to sort of like pull that weight forward a little bit. But like I also mentioned, there's no hip belt or anything here to do any additional lifting off. That said, I feel like this one fits me personally, my frame, a little bit better. I have a 16-inch torso, and it just doesn't feel like it doesn't feel as heavy, even though I have the exact same amount of weight on the inside. And part of that could be because of the bag itself, but I think a large amount of that comes down to the actual shoulder straps here. For my frame, these are perfect because they are just padded enough to be comfortable, but not super wide, and they taper down at the bottom, so like my arms aren't hitting it or anything. However, we do have some people on the team who have larger frames, and they found that these were a little bit too thin for them. So it really is going to be a user by user basis. But I don't think that without a hip belt here, I'm really losing like that much extra comfort on this Bellroy. I don't think it would hurt. But with the Allpa, it's kind of like, you know, you have a little bit of extra weight lifted off, but between the two of them, the biggest issue that we have with it is kind of it starts to like pull back a little bit. So it's kind of up to your preference, whether or not it's like an aesthetic thing or, you know, what your build is. But both of them in general are very comfortable. If you're finding this video helpful, hit subscribe so we can keep making content to help you travel smarter. Looking at the secondary compartments for these two bags, I did remove a bunch of stuff from the Bellroy. We're gonna basically take things from the Cotopaxi and move them over as we go to kind of give you an idea of what they look like side by side with the same storage. But in terms of like, you know, external component or the other pockets that you can use on the outside of this, with the Allpa, we have this top quick grab pocket that's it has a decent amount of like its own storage here. If you have the main compartment like packed very, very full, which I currently do, then it's going to cut into this space. But even with that, I can still easily fit, obviously with my hand, but like a phone or a wallet or something in here, passport. So that's really good for quick grabs. And then there's another top pocket as well. So these both have two external pockets. They just kind of serve different functions. And then the water bottle pocket, which I mentioned earlier. But with the Bellroy, the only top pocket we have is this one here. So this is a little passport pocket. It fits your passport, a key leash as well, and then a pen slot. And then the rest of the space is it has like its own packing space, which is nice because then it starts to, the Bellroy more so than the Cotopaxi is like these two pockets on the front have their really own individual storage, and as you filled those out, then it starts to fill out this space here. With the Cotopaxi, a couple of different pockets are arranged differently, so it's not quite the same. But Cotopaxi does have this other top pocket, which you can see is quite large. So we have a very solid base down on the bottom here, and that gives you like a platform almost to pack a bunch of stuff onto. With this pocket being on the outside, like what I use this for primarily was like a toiletry bag or something like that. If I was going through security, then it was quick and easy to grab. But you can also do like extra layers or something like that. That top pocket is so nice for those items. Like you saw here, I have a whole packing cube there. And then this back pocket is zippered and has a key leash in there as well. So you've got that pocket. This pocket is definitely larger than Bellroy's top pocket. You can see this cube that fit very easily in there. Doesn't quite fit in Bellroy's top pocket here, but where it does fit is in this front pocket. So this front pocket is like a good spot where you would store like an additional layer, maybe like a travel pillow or something like that. And you could store basically anything that you would put in here is where you would put like something like that in this pocket here. But I also did have a smaller toiletry bag, not quite as big as that packing cube, that fit perfectly fine in this Bellroy top compartment. So it's definitely going to, where this is gonna, because once we get into the inside, you'll see that the organization is very similar. It's gonna come down to like your individual items. I would say if you're somebody who likes to shove things in cubes and just throw them in a bag, the Allpa is gonna be a better choice for that, whereas the Bellroy is a little bit more particular, and it's almost designed to not need cubes at all. Granted, you can do that with the Allpa. We'll get into the inside in a second. But you have the main difference between these two is that with the Allpa, you have a skinny little top pocket here, and then a very, very large kind of half moon zippered pocket up at the top. And then with the Bellroy, you have that half moon zippered pocket up at the top, and then a larger pocket down on the side as well with its own individual packing space, which now let's get into the inside and kind of see how that all plays with each other. So for the sake of time, I've opened up both bags, but they both have very beefy main compartment zippers. With the Bellroy, you can see it's like reverse coil aqua guard. With the Allpa, it's just reverse coil, but they both feel very sturdy, and like when I'm zipping them up, even when they're completely full, I feel like the zippers can handle the job, which is good. But the organization this is where we're gonna see some similarities. So actually I think I'm just gonna do maybe this, and then we'll start. Yeah, that works better. So we're gonna start with these big buckets. So what I have over, actually let me start with the tops, because I think that's makes more sense for a comparison. So what we have here, this compartment on the front ends basically where this compartment on the bottom on the inside stops up at the top. And then that means that basically any packing space, instead of making this a big bucket, they gave you like a bucket on the outside to fit like a pouch or something like that, which is nice. So this is a completely flat pocket. It doesn't have its own it has like a little bit of individual storage, but not a ton. So this is where you'd put like hats here or socks or underwear or something like that, that just could be flatter. And then I saved this space in the front for those like larger pouches, like a tech pouch or a toiletry bag or something like that. And then this zippered pocket opens, and you've got a nice beefy kind of inside with a ton of bucket space. I mean, you can see basically if you were to not fill up anything on this side here, this would lay completely flat. And then if you wanted to put a cube in here, you can see almost like that where that ridge is, the cube would pop out here, and then vice versa if you had a bunch of stuff in this here and then this top bit was completely flat, it would just kind of taper down. So that's what I was talking about earlier, where like if you don't pack it out completely, it starts to look a little bit like saggy or floppy or lumpy. Whereas with the Bellroy, we'll get into it in a second, but these two individual pocket spaces are completely their own space compared, like they don't interact with these two pockets on the front. So if you fill out these two spaces and then leave these two empty, these look really flat and weird. Or, you know, if you leave these empty but pack out these two, you're not really gonna notice anything because none of this space interferes with this space or interacts with it. So kind of a one-to-one use case, but you can see we've got, like, if you're just looking bare bones, you have pocket, 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 pocket. So this is where I'm talking about where the designs look very similar. So this was the cube that was in this bottom compartment. I can fit this same exact cube over into this Bellroy bag, but it's not quite as easy. So I think when I'm talking about like you just want to be able to throw things into a bag, the Cotopaxi is great for that because all of these bucket compartments are all so easy to open up. You get a full view of everything. With the Bellroy here, like when I was packing this out, I actually didn't use cubes. I used just like individual pairs of pants and tops. And I kind of you have to like slide them in just like I had to do with that cube. And it zips up perfectly fine, still fits the same amount of stuff, but the packing experience is a little bit different. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. This is a cube where it doesn't really have a place from one to one. So this cube does not actually fit like in this pocket up at the top. And no, it doesn't fit in this pocket up at the top, but it does fit in the front compartment up at the top. So this is kind of like the floater where if you like, I think the Bellroy does better if you don't want to have any cubes at all, just because then you're not trying to fit a cube in a very specific space. So in this case, I would just do, I would do socks, underwear, that type of a thing in this pocket. And this pocket has its own independent storage. So everything starts to pack out this way. And then you still have these two front compartments to pack with gear as well that start to pack out as well. So it's a very subtle difference between the two of them, but it does make a difference. And then we look at the bucket shapes, which are, I would say, the most one-to-one comparison between these two bags here. We've got the Bellroy, which just opens with its little mesh compartment, and then the Cotopaxi that does the exact same thing. So I have a size 10.5 men's shoe in here that fits perfectly over. You can see in the Allpa, there's like maybe a little extra space on the side that you can probably fit a slightly larger shoe. With the Bellroy, there's like maybe just a little bit of extra room on the side. So with both of these, you can go a little bit larger with some of your items. But I would say that the Allpa does a little bit better at kind of like holding its structure, I would say, just because the materials are a little bit thicker, whereas the Bellroy is a little bit more flexible, which means that you can, in my experience, shove things in very strange places and have it not look like really lumpy or wonky. But that's something to keep in mind. So the same cube, same shoes fit into the Bellroy. And then you have the same amount of, packing space, just like, let's say I hypothetically were to just split this cube essentially in two. I could fit, half of the stuff in here, half of the stuff in here, or in that other pocket. So just kind of depends on like the type of packing you're looking to do. But in terms of organization, they are so similar. I don't think you can go wrong with either bag, but I do think that the Bellroy is more of a neutral aesthetic, I would say. And it doesn't, as long as you utilize these two front pockets on the outside, because you can see I've got all of this stuff in here, and this is still maybe looking a little bit lumpy, but if I were to stick this cube in there, that fits and it can still shut. And then that kind of rounds out the front of the pack a little bit. So just kind of depends on where you want to put your items. I would say the Cotopaxi does a really good job if you just want to throw cubes you have in there or not use them. But the Bellroy is a little bit tougher to use with existing packing cubes and pouches, just because I feel like it functions really well without. So there you have it, the Cotopaxi Allpa and the Bellroy Lite Travel Pack. Thanks for keeping it here at Pack Hacker, your guide to smarter travel, and we'll see you in the next one.